You're listening to the VMO Show. I'm your host, Stacy Harbaugh. You may recognize my voice from Polka Time with DJ Shotsky on WVMO, but I'm in the studios today to interview a local clean water advocate. We're here to talk to Lance Green, who is the co-chair of the Friends of Starkweather Creek. And we're here to talk about what's up with the creek and how you can get involved to protect the water in your backyard. So welcome to the WVMO studios, Lance.
Well, thanks a lot, Stacy. I'm so glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here.
Glad we can let people know about our creek. It's such a gem on the east side of Madison.
It is a gem, and we love our water in the WVMO listening area. So tell us a little bit more about the Friends of Starkweather Creek, your purpose, and what you're out there to do.
Well, we organized in 2002. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization that's totally run by volunteers, and we advocate mostly for the health of the creek. And I'll explain today some of the things we do for the health of the creek. And we also love to get folks out on the creek. We have a bunch of canoes over by Old Brick Park, and later I'll talk about our first event, April 18th. But that's what we like to do. Sometimes we paddle, sometimes we take bicyclists along the creek, we take nature walks along the creek, but we also do a lot of surveying and a lot more too. One of the things that we do, of course, is try and improve the habitat for the critters that live along the creek. So we're out there removing invasives with work crews and planting a bunch of native plants so that we have a lot more native habitat on the creek.
I think that's amazing that you do so much as a group of volunteers. I mean, really passionate people who want to see that little part of our ecosystem thrive and be healthy.
Yeah, well, we've got a 25 square mile watershed that you may know that it empties out there at Old Brick Park. You can see the creek going out there where there's boat landings, and then the whole east and northeast side of Madison, all the way past the airport, past the interstate, all of that drains into Lake Monona through our creek. So our concerns are what goes on in that area and what's draining into the creek.
Well, and in such an urban area, too. I mean, you mentioned that we have the airport. We've got highways and byways and neighborhoods and just lots of humanity that's all packed in to that area of our community. And, you know, it really does take that thoughtful group of committed citizens to be a voice for something that doesn't have a voice.
It's true. And all the critters that live in there don't have a voice. So we
true.
advocate for them. And as I say, it's a large area and a lot of things go on in that area. So we work with city engineering on projects that are going on near the creek, and they're doing a watershed study since we had that big 2018 flood. And so they're studying the various watersheds in the city to see if they can help improve to not have such a big risk of flooding in there. And so we work with them on any projects going on. We work with Parks Department. For instance, we've got the Voigt property. I don't know if a lot of people know about that, but just off Milwaukee Street was this big old farm. It's been there for 150 years. And the Voigts decided a few years ago that they wanted to sell what's left of that property just between Highway 30 and Milwaukee Street. And so we looked at that very carefully and said, the creek runs by there. That's just north of Milwaukee. And as I said, we'd like, one of the things we focus on is a green corridor for life. And so from Old Brick Park and north of Garver, OB Sherry Park, and then north of there, there's a nice new bike path that goes right through OB Sherry and ends on Milwaukee Street. Well, that's going to be extended along the creek, and so the north part of that 65 acres, we're hoping to, and it looks like we're going forward with extending Starkweather Conservation Park. So look forward to having a nice place to go to watch birds and feel nature and get that nice peaceful nature feeling in the future. So we're working with city parks on the planning of that area, for instance.
Well, that's incredible. And when I think about the bike path and the beautiful green spaces that are there, out behind Garver Feed Mill, it's because of citizen groups like the Friends of Starkweather Creek that are a part of the process, that are talking to government, that are a part of the planning process. Like if it weren't for you guys to speak up for that creek, you know, it might not have even been a top priority for developers to, you know, consider that green space. Now, I know that there are some important pollution issues that you guys have been working on as well. So we're going to take a little break and we're going to come back and talk about how you are tackling those things. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the VMO Show. I'm your host, Stacy Harbaugh, here in the studios with Lance Green from the Friends of Starkweather Creek. And he's been talking to us about how the group advocates for the health of the creek and the surrounding areas. And as we know, as a part of the watershed that goes right around and encompasses the Dane County Airport, there are some serious pollution concerns that have been in the headlines lately. So, Lance, I'd love for you to talk to us more about what those pollution concerns are and what your organization is doing in a very hands-on way to test the water and figure out what's going on.
Oh, thank you much, Stacy. Yeah, we have several issues that are going on with the creek, and I'll talk about three of the chemical issues that we have there. But first I'll talk about PFAS, PFAS. It's a group of really nasty chemicals that have been shown to cause all kinds of nasty health effects. And we really didn't know about this more than about 8 years ago. We started finding out about that long ago in the 50s and 60s and 70s. The Dane County Airport worked with the Air National Guard and said, you can set up here on the airport, and all you got to do is pay us $1 a month and then also provide fire services for the airport. Well, what that involved was using chemical foam that the military had adopted all over the world, and that foam is basically PFAS. And so along a couple spots in the creek, the Air National Guard set up training sites where you'd put a bunch of metal and stuff, and then you'd pour a bunch of jet fuel or whatever on it, set it on fire, and show how you could put it out with the PFAS foam. And of course, it was right next to the creek, and at that time, well, people didn't really know much about or have much concerns about it like we've heard about so many other chemicals, and so a whole lot of it was dumped right there next to the creek. And ever since, it's been oozing down into the ground and seeping on the sides into the creek, because the airport was basically a wetland, and so it's very shallow groundwater there, and the water just seeps right into the creek and also seeps down into the ground. You probably heard that a few years ago, the Madison Water Utility found out that well 15 right there on East Washington was getting higher and higher levels of PFAS oozing a mile away from these sites and down 1,000 feet into the ground. So this stuff really travels, and well 15 now has a nice filter system on it, which we put together, but it's still oozing out into the creek. And as I said, that creek goes into Lake Monona, which goes into Lake Higanza and Lake Wabisa. So if you got 50, 60 years of pollution going in there, all the lakes, all the fish, all the plants, all the sediment are polluted with PFAS. When the DNR has done some measurements and found out kind of high levels that we have one of the highest levels in the state coming out the west branch of the creek, just south of the airport. You might know where Anderson Street is. So that's when we take measurements there, we find some of the highest levels in the state. And we wanted to kind of start a regular program to monitor what's going on with that issue. And so in 2024, we put together some funds and got some monitors, and we monitored all different parts of the creek, all of the Yahara lakes, and several other places around Dane County to see, what kind of the background level, what's PFAS look like elsewhere and such. But we found extremely high levels in the west branch of Starkweather, where Starkweather goes into Lake Monona. In Lake Monona, Higanza, Wabisa, there's levels that are higher than the standards for sure. The levels just south of the airport are thousands of times higher than the standards. And as we looked at the data from DNR, we found that the fish have levels that are hundreds of thousands of times the standard we now have for water. So one of the worst environmental injustice situations in Madison is there's a lot of people out there you see fishing, taking those fish home to feed their families. So it's one of our really big concerns. The Dane County has recently put together a project to help out in the sources of that PFAS. They've injected some biologically active materials and some microbes to hopefully chomp up those PFAS and break them down. So we're really hopeful for that. We did see this past year in 2025, when we repeated our measurements, slightly lower levels in the creek. And so we're wanting to be real hopeful about that.
That's incredible. And what hands-on work you guys are doing to measure those. Like, the DNR can't be everywhere. They can't do everything. And it really takes folks who care to get out there. So that's PFAS, and we know that that's been in the headlines. But you're monitoring for a couple of other substances too, right?
Sure, absolutely. And one thing everybody's real familiar is salt.
Oh, winters in Wisconsin.
We put salt down out there, man. It's all winter. We don't want any slippery spaces, so we put salt down. And for years and years and years, it was kind of done willy-nilly on all the sidewalks, all the parking lots, all the streets and everywhere. But people started realizing, 15, 20 years ago, that we've got rising levels of salt, both down on our drinking water and in our surface waters, and not just in Madison, but a whole lot of places in Wisconsin. So there was a program started called Wisconsin Saltwise, and it's done right here started right here in Dane County, and now it's spread over so that other states are wanting to know, how do you reduce your salt and control your salt? So the city and the county train people to put lower and lower levels of salt on. For 5 years, the Friends of Starkweather have grants to actually monitor the levels of salt. First, we started with people going out with little test strips and finding what the salt was everywhere. A couple of years ago, we installed some permanent monitors at 8 sites along the creek, so they could constantly measure and show in graphs regularly to the public what the kind of salt levels we're having in there. And I think we've had some real success reducing the amount of salt going into the creek. So that's our chloride study. Chloride is very dangerous at high levels for life. And so, we have fresh water here, not salt water beings.
Right.
So
that's right.
That's what we do. And the other issue what we test for is phosphorus. Phosphorus is not too bad in Starkweather Creek because we don't have a lot of agricultural land and fertilizer going into it. We do have a lot above Lake Mendota coming in from agriculture, and you've probably heard of suck the muck to get the phosphorus out of the sediment and stuff like that. So we actually wanted to see what's the contribution of Starkweather Creek to this issue, and it's another project we do.
That's incredible. Well, kudos to your organization for being these community scientists who are out there and testing, and it just really is one of the most hands-on thing that people can do to take care of their water, is just knowing what's in it. So we really appreciate it. All right, and you have a lot of fun while you're doing it. So speaking of fun, we're going to take a quick break, and I would love to hear a little bit more about how people can get involved in your organization with some springtime activities. So we'll take a break and be right back. And welcome back to the VMO Show. I'm your host, Stacy Harbaugh, here with Lance Green from the Friends of Starkweather Creek. Well, it is spring. Spring is springing, and it's raining outside of our studios today right now. But we know that with Earth Day coming up, it's a great time for water protection and environmental protection organizations to talk to folks in the community about what they can do to protect the water and the green spaces in their backyard. And I'm sure that the Friends of Starkweather Creek is no different. So, Lance, tell me a little bit about what events you have coming up and how people can do their own hands-on cleanup, testing, and water protection work.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Stacy. Yeah, we as an organization start our year with Earth Week, and on April 18th at 10 o'clock at Ulbrich Park, you can help us out. We have a creek cleanup and a paddle. So if you come down there and you want to paddle in a canoe, and we've got grabbers and gloves and garbage bags and all that kind of stuff, and we send people up the creek to find what they can find there. And sometimes it gets interesting. I mean, in the last 20 years of doing this, we've seen less and less and less actual trash put along a large part of the creek. There are a couple of problem areas that we send crews specifically to, but it's really wonderful to see that people seem to be getting a little bit more good-natured about throwing stuff out. Boy, 50 to 100 years ago, the creek was a dump. Yeah. And it was just considered, a place where people threw trash. And, just threw your trash down the bank of the creek. But that doesn't happen anymore. And so we send people up the creek on Earth Week, April 18th, and we also send some crews out with some equipment to go and clean up a couple of problem areas. And it's a lot of fun. So I hope you can come down there. If you have a kayak or a canoe, bring it on down, because we usually have more people than we can get in our 10 canoes. So bring your canoe down, and we'll send people out and then come back while other people are out doing other groundwork on the sides We do a lot of other events too. Every third Saturday of the month, every month of the year, we have nature walks or events along the creek. Sometimes it's a bike ride. Sometimes it's a talk about, what do we find in the creek and how do we monitor it, and look at all these little creatures that are in the creek. And sometimes it's a flower walk. I mean, we do a lot of different things to show people that there is nature right here on the east side, and you can really enjoy it. We are certainly always looking for people who want to help us out with our monitoring work, and you can find out everything about us on our website, starkweatherfriends.org, and we're also on a Facebook page that announces our events, and we have a newsletter if you'd like to sign up for that. So we're really looking forward to Earth Week and all the wonderful things we do this year. Oh yeah, we do also have work days where people plant plants and rip out nasty invasives and stuff like that. So a lot of variety of what we do, and we hope you can join us.
Well, I think that's great. And remind us one more time, when is the April 18th event? What time of day does that come in?
10 o'clock in the morning at Olbrick, the inner boat launch.
I love it. So it sounds like a great time to get out, to do some hands-on cleanup work, to learn a little bit more about the science that gets applied through your organization, and, bring some friends, bring some family, and get out and clean up a creek for Earth Day. I love it.
Thanks a lot, Stacy.
Well, I'm so glad you could come in. Thanks for being a guest of the VMO Show, Lance. And I encourage you to take a look at the waters that are in your backyard and think about what you can do to protect them. For the VMO Show, this is your host, Stacy Harbaugh. Thanks for listening. Take care.